Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? In my experience, one of the most important things you can do in your life is to figure out what matters most to you. Not what matters most to me, not what matters most to somebody else, not what society or your family or whoever tells you should matter most to you. What matters most to you? What kind of life do you want to live? What will you tolerate or not tolerate? What do you want to spend your time doing? What people do you want to have around you? What other things do you want to have around you? Once you figure that out and you get that clarity, let that clarity guide your decision-making process, even if it rubs up against other people. And let me tell you a story. When I was a kid, I grew up without air conditioning, and we grew up in New England, and the summers, despite being a northern state, they're brutally hot and humid, and I hate the humidity, I hate the heat. And that is actually, I could put it on the list of a growing number of reasons why moving to Canada sounds like a really good idea, but that's another topic for another time. So it was brutal, no air conditioning, and we didn't have fans blowing at us. We had some window units, which makes no sense to me. I'm not sure why they weren't blowing on us and keeping us cool. And Mom eventually bought some window, air conditioning unit, which we weren't really allowed to use because it cost too much to run. So I'm not sure why we had it except for decoration. And when we moved out, she got central air. So go figure. But the point is, when I was a kid, I promised myself that I was never going to live like that again. Once I was an adult and I had my own money. And I kept that promise. No matter how much air conditioners cost, I bought them. No matter how ridiculous the electric bill has gotten, I paid it. I would rather eat ramen and be comfortable in the summertime than be miserable and save some money. And I've even gotten into arguments with people that I was living with about the idea that I, not them, but I was paying too much for electricity on principle or something. And I didn't care, And, this video isn't really about air conditioners, is it? It's about sticking to your priorities. It's about choosing your priorities and then defending those priorities. The things that are the most valuable to you. Because you don't have to live according to somebody else's list. Now, to be sure, a lot of the things that we think are important in the moment, things that we mistakenly assigned as priorities, they're not that important at all, are they? There's so many things that have happened that it seems so dramatic and so important in the moment, and then I realized that they really weren't all that important to begin with. It's just one of the reasons it's important to kind of make this list and figure this out for yourself. There's other things that are just non-negotiables for me. Things like truth, things like freedom, things like the people I love, things like, the hobbies I have or the pursuits I have, like music and RPGs and learning and, all that sort of stuff and self-improvement and just being a decent human being and recovery. These are important, but a lot of other things aren't as much. But those aren't up for debate. These are like guiding priorities and things that are most important. And the life that I want to live, if I really laid it all out, it might look ridiculous to you. And to be honest, the life that you want to live might look ridiculous to me, but who are we to judge each other's priorities and values? If we figured it out for ourselves, what do we have to say to each other about that? What does anybody else have to say to you? Now, sure, there are people that say they want one thing, but you can tell they're living against their priorities. They're living according to somebody else's script. And I'm not talking about that, because sometimes you can talk to these people and they start to kind of out themselves. Maybe they really haven't thought about it very much, and they start to realize, I'm not really sure what I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about people who have really figured out what they want. Who are we to say anything different? And you can ask yourself, when you have these conflicts with people over your priorities, why not just set the thermostat higher? Why not just compromise? But the thing is, peace that's gained at the cost of your priorities, that's not really peace at all, is it? That's just you laying down what's most important to you in order to appease other people, and people that in many cases aren't really all that important to you anyway. You know what I mean? So, ask yourself this: how many things truly matter to you that you are not prioritizing? Just because you're afraid of what somebody else might think. And I could think of ones myself that I have put aside, that I decide to pick back up again, and still ones I still struggle with, they're real priorities, but I'm just afraid what somebody else's reaction might be. But what about you? Do you have stuff like that happen? And more importantly than that, how long are you going to keep on living like that? That's a question I had to ask myself, and it's a question I think is worth asking yourself when you find yourself in those positions, and realize, what, there's things that I value, there's things that are priorities, and I'm not letting them guide my life, because that, my friends, is painful. And we shouldn't have to go through that kind of pain. You know what I mean? So, if this resonated with you, go ahead and like the video. Go ahead and subscribe. Comment. I'd really love to hear your comments on this, because I think this is a really big, juicy topic. And so I think it's worthy of discussion. Have a good one, kids.